There are countless modern horror films that attempt to sustain tension across their runtime, but very few manage to maintain a sense of momentum without either exhausting the audience through relentless escalation or losing themselves in stretches of an activity that dilute their own impact. Yet The Conjuring 2 stands out to me as a rare exception in modern horror, a sequel that feels constantly in motion without ever feeling rushed, forced, or structurally unstable. From the moment it establishes its tone, there is an immediate sense that the film understands rhythm on a fundamental level, carefully balancing quiet dread with escalating terror in a way that feels deliberate rather than reactive, controlled rather than excessive. What strikes me most is how effortlessly it transitions between moments of stillness and chaos, never allowing either state to overstay its welcome, never letting tension dissipate completely, and never overwhelming me to the point of disengagement. The experience becomes less about individual scares and more about the cumulative effect of sustained unease, where every scene contributes to an overarching flow that feels cohesive, intentional, and meticulously constructed. It doesn't rely on constant intensity to keep me engaged. Instead, it spaces its horror, builds its atmosphere with patience, and trusts in its pacing to carry the weight. It ensures that even in its quietest moments, Conjuring 2 feels active, purposeful, and filled with latent tension waiting to surface. What makes this even more impressive is that The Conjuring 2 is not a minimalistic or tightly contained film. It is expansive, layered, and structurally ambitious, juggling multiple narrative threads, tonal shifts, and emotional arcs without ever collapsing under the weight of its own scope or losing clarity in its direction. The narrative moves between the Enfield haunting, the Warrens' personal lives, and the broader supernatural framework with a fluidity that feels almost invincible, as though each element is naturally feeding into the next, rather than competing for attention or disrupting the flow of the film. This is where the film separates itself from so many of its modern contemporaries. It understands that pacing is not synonymous with speed, but with control, an awareness of when to linger, when to accelerate, and when to allow silence framing an atmosphere to do the work that dialogue or action often overcompensates for. I never feel like I'm waiting for something to happen, because even in its slower moments, the film is actively building tension, layering unease, and subtly guiding my expectations towards what is coming next. It is this constant sense of forward movement, this refusal to stagnate even when it appears to slow down, that gives the film its distinct rhythm and makes it feel so constantly engaging from beginning to end. What makes the pacing of The Conjuring 2 so effective, and so distinct from many modern horror films that attempt similar structures, is that it is rooted in control rather than excess, in precision rather than volume, in an understanding that tension is something to be cultivated rather than constantly discharged. The film doesn't overwhelm me with a barrage of scares or rely on relentless noise to simulate intensity. Instead, it carefully calibrates each moment, allowing tension to build gradually, almost imperceptibly, before releasing it in ways that feel earned, impactful, and narratively justified. This creates a rhythm that feels natural and fluid, where I'm never pulled out of the experience by abrupt tonal shifts, misplaced scares, or even sequences that exist purely for spectacle without contributing to the overall structure. Every scene serves a purpose, whether it's deepening character relationships, expanding the mythology of the haunting, or subtly increasing the sense of dread that permeates the entire film. That cohesion ensures that nothing feels wasted or indulgent, reinforcing a sense of intentionality that keeps the pacing tight without making it feel compressed or hurried. The film's use of space, silence, and visual composition plays an equally crucial role in maintaining this sense of control, transforming what could have been moments of inactivity into sequences that are actively engaging, psychologically charged, and filled with anticipation. Quiet scenes are never empty. They are loaded with implication, with the sense that something is about to break, even if that break is delayed or subverted entirely. This is where the pacing becomes almost psychological in nature. It manipulates expectation and attention in a way that keeps me constantly alert without overexhausting me. Instead of rushing from one scare to the next, the film allows tension to stretch just enough to become uncomfortable, but never enough to dissipate entirely. This creates a delicate balance that sustains engagement across long stretches of screen time. It's not simply about what happens, but about when it happens and how long the film is willing to make me wait for it, using that waiting period as a tool rather than just a limitation. tension. There is also a structural discipline in how the film escalates its horror, ensuring that each sequence feels like a meaningful progression rather than a repetition of familiar beats or ideas. The scares evolve in both scale and context, the stakes increase in ways that feel organic, and the narrative deepens alongside the horror rather than over being shadowed by it. I am not just watching variations of the same set piece, I am watching a story unfold, one that uses its horror elements as mechanisms of development rather than isolated moments of spectacle. This progression prevents the film from feeling stagnant or cyclical, as each moment builds upon the last. It creates a cumulative effect that reinforces the pacing rather than just outright disrupting it. It's this layering of tension, where each new development adds weight to what came before, that gives the film its sustained momentum and prevents it from ever feeling like it's treading water. Ultimately, what stands out to me is how most of the film feels in its own rhythm, how it never appears to second guess its pacing or overcompensate for perceived lulls with unnecessary escalation or filler, where every choice, whether it's cut, a pause, or a lingering shot, or a sudden burst of intensity, feels deliberate and considered, contributing to an overall flow that is both engaging and cohesive. There is a clarity of vision here that allows the film to maintain its momentum without relying on shortcuts or excess. It guides me through its narrative with a steady, controlled hand that never loses sight of its pacing. It never feels like the film is struggling to keep my attention, because it never gives me a reason to disengage. Instead, it continuously reinforces its rhythm, ensuring that every moment feels connected, purposeful, and part of a larger, carefully constructed experience. What elevates the pacing of The Conjuring 2 beyond technical precision is how deeply it integrates character and emotion into its sense of movement, ensuring that the film never feels like it is progressing solely through plot mechanics or horror set pieces, but through a constant interplay between external events and internal experiences. The presence of Ed and Lorraine Warren is not just functional, it is foundational, grounding the supernatural elements in a human context that makes every scene feel more immediate, more personal, and more engaging. Their relationship, their vulnerabilities, and their quiet moments of connection act as emotional anchors that maintain momentum even when the external action begins to slow down. This creates a continuous sense of progression that is driven as much by feeling as it is by narrative development. This is crucial because it means the film never stops. It simply shifts focus, moving from external tension to internal reflection without losing its sense of direction or purpose. The structure of the Enfield case itself reinforces this momentum by unfolding gradually, revealing its layers in a way that feels both deliberate and methodical rather than rushed or overly convenient. Each new piece of information builds upon what came before, deepening the mystery while simultaneously increasing the stakes. This creates a sense of forward movement that feels organic and earned. I'm constantly being given reasons to stay engaged, new angles to consider, and new tensions to process. All of this prevents the narrative from ever feeling static or predictable. Even scenes that are primarily investigative or dialogue-driven carry weight, because they are actively contributing to the build-up of tension and the expansion of the narrative rather than interrupting it. The film understands that pacing is not just about action, it's about information, about how and when things are revealed, and how those revelations shape the flow of the story. There is also a remarkable consistency in tone that supports this sense of momentum, allowing the film to move seamlessly between different types of scenes without feeling disjointed or fragmented, whether it's a quiet moment of character interaction, an investigative sequence, or a full-scale horror set piece. Everything feels aligned within a cohesive vision that prioritizes flow and continuity. This tonal consistency prevents abrupt shifts that could disrupt the pacing, ensuring that each transition feels natural and integrated rather than jarring or forced. The film moves with a quiet kind of confidence, trusting in its structure, its characters, and its atmosphere to carry the narrative forward without the need for constant escalation or artificial intensity. In the end, it is this combination of emotional grounding, structural discipline, and tonal consistency that allows the film to maintain its momentum so effectively, creating an experience that feels continuously engaging without ever becoming overwhelming or exhausting. The pacing works not because the film is constantly accelerating, but because it is always moving, always evolving, always providing something meaningful to engage with, whether that is tension, emotion, or narrative development. It's a subtle but powerful distinction, one that separates it from so many other horror films that mistake noise for momentum, and it's what makes the experience of this film feel so complete, so cohesive, and so consistently compelling from beginning to end. What ultimately defines The Conjuring 2 for me is not just that it is well paced, but that it understands pacing as a form of rhythm that permeates every aspect of its construction, governing how tension is built, how emotion is conveyed, and how the narrative unfolds over time. It doesn't rush to reach its peaks, nor does it linger to the point of stagnation. Instead, it moves with intention, balancing its elements in a way that feels cohesive, deliberate, and consistently engaging. This understanding allows it to sustain momentum across its entire runtime, without ever relying on constant intensity or spectacle. This provides a true type of pacing which is about control rather than speed, about knowing how to guide the audience's attention rather than overwhelming it. And that's why it never feels like it slows down, even in its quietest moments, because these moments are never empty. They are filled with tension, implication, and purpose, contributing to a continuous flow that keeps me invested from beginning to the very end. The film creates a seamless interplay between build-up and release, between anticipation and payoff, ensuring that every moment feels connected to what came before and what follows after. In a genre where pacing is often misunderstood as relentless escalation, this stands out as something far more refined. A reminder that the most effective horror is not the loudest or the fastest, but the most controlled. It's that control, that deliberate and unwavering sense of rhythm that makes the film so rewatchable, so engaging, and ultimately so effective as both a horror experience and a piece of storytelling.